Hello. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us on our session promoted by Pasture for Life, focused on pasture finishing sheep and cattle. I'm going to make a brief introduction to our panel, and they will kick on and introduce themselves properly. At the end of the session, we're going to have 10-minute Q&A, so if you wouldn't mind waiting until there before you pose any questions to us. Okay, so thanks very much. We're going to kick on. So I'd like to introduce Denise, Angus, Kitty and Simon, and we'll start with Kitty telling you all about what she does.
Hello. So I'm farming in South Herefordshire on the River Wye. We've got 125 head of pedigree Hereford cattle and 250 breeding ewes, easy care. We finish everything on farm and sell through mainly our own business, direct selling, direct to consumer, pubs, restaurants, and to some butchers as well. We're organic, and the sheep and the cattle are pasture fed.
Hello everyone, Angus, Nelless here, farm in mid-Northumberland at Thistleyhalf, along with my brother Duncan in a 5-family partnership. Farming about 750 hectares of grassland, which consists of about 3/4 of it's permanent pasture, quarter in lays. Been organic since 2005. We run a suckler, herd, breeder, finisher, and a flock of ewes, signet recorded ewes, finishing everything on farm as well, all on a forage-based system.
Hi everybody, Denise, Walton, farm at Pelham Farm in southeast Berwickshire, southern Scotland, with my husband and our son in a farm business partnership. We are 650 acres, organic pasture for life. We went organic in 2005 and adopted pasture for life principles in 2015. We sell direct. We built a butchery in 2008, and now we sell everything that we produce on the farm through our butchery. We have 150 head of Aberdeen Angus suckler cows, and obviously we fatten. We bring in flying flocks of mutton and also cull sows for our charcuterie. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Simon Taylor. I'm the odd one out. I'm a butcher. I'm not a farmer. I have a couple of butcheries in Surrey Hills Butchers. Worked with Pasture for Life Association probably since about 2018, 2019, something like that. And we've seen a massive demand for this product, people becoming aware of what this is and what this means. And because of that, we try and work closely with farmers to bring that into our supply chain. Still a journey. Obviously, we still use other farming methods and other meat comes through our shop, but wherever we can, we support Pasture for Life Association. Our shops aren't huge. They're quite traditional, but for that we have much better connectivity with our customers, and that seems to really bring this message over and this product over. Should I mention the Team GB bit as well? I don't really like talking about this. I'm also captain of Team GB. You obviously all knew there was a national butchery team, but we do have one. I'm captain of it. And much like an organisation like this, we are trying to get out there and spread the word. And it is that connectivity where we can help farmers. We can help bring that message. Real farm to fork has to include the whole journey, and obviously we're part of it. Bit more? Once more? Yeah, so we've been butchering Surrey Hills as a business for the last 12 years. I've been a butcher since I was 13, so coming up to 30 years in the industry. You're welcome to say that I don't look old enough. Anyone? But yeah, I've been butchering for a long time, and for a long time for me, butchery was just my job, and it took me a long time to really fall in love with it and really start to find out about it. It was actually, I don't know when it was, probably 2011, 2012, I started working with a local wildlife trust, and we were getting their meat as a byproduct of the good work that they were doing because they were trying to regenerate the local landscape. And that was a completely new concept to me at that time. And we continue to work with them a little bit where we can. Haven't had great success recently, but that's when Pasture for Life has really come in and taken that supply chain for us. Do you want me to go into the next bit, Nigel?
If you just want to, then sort of fill us in what it is you're looking from the farmers,
really. So there's a lot of, I'm going to keep using the word connection, because we need to be connected to the farmers. We need to know the story, because as much as our customers are coming in and they want to know about welfare, they want to know about environmental impact, they want to know about nutrition, when you become a butcher, that's not really the first thing you think. I've got to learn about nutrition or farming or welfare and all those kind of things. So it's a big journey for us as well, but it's becoming more and more apparent. The days where you would go into your butcher, or more to the point, the customer would go into the butchers and know exactly what they wanted. So this sort of generational disconnect that we've got, where my nan or her mum, whoever, would go into a butcher's and they'd know the specific cut that they were looking for, and they'd know the name of it, and they'd know exactly what to do with it, more importantly, and the butcher would just hand that over. That was the transaction. These days we have to pass that knowledge with it. So if somebody's coming in for a flat iron, or they want a scrag of lamb, gonna fall off my chair, we need to know what that is, and also we need to help the customer cook that. I'm probably preaching to the choir in here, because you're probably all quite educated about your meat cuts. But within that, that's when we start to have this conversation of, well, what is my meat doing to the environment? What is my meat doing to my nutrition? And what is the welfare of the meat that I'm buying? And more, as much as I can try and stand in my shop and talk to somebody about soil and why that's important, it quite simply is not sexy. And we all know this. So to try and get it over to people, we have to create this USP, this unique selling point. Because our customers are looking for all these things. They're also looking for flavour. They're looking for marbling. As a butcher, I'm looking for yield. I have to run a business. If I can't make money, then I can't support the right things and do the right things. So from the farmers, what I need to bring in is something that ticks all those initial boxes. So it's traceability. It's reassurance that we're doing the right thing for the planet and the right thing for our bodies in terms of what we put in ourselves, or our own medicine, but also, is it going to work in my business model? Is it going to come through consistently? Is it going to come through marbled? All these things, I'm reliant on the farmers to do that. Just to put some numbers on the table, for example, if we were to buy a pasture-fed animal for somewhere around, I'm talking beef here, if we were to buy from Sam Newington, the crowd there, if we were to buy from Sam, I would pay to him a harvested weight, that's our new term, rather than dead weight, gets across much easier. Our harvested weight, I would pay him anywhere from, I don't know, £5.40, £6 a kilo, something like that. Once I've then butchered that product, so I've put some labour on it, I'm going to look at a boneless cost of about, let's say, £8.50, £9 a kilo. Now that would be very cheap if I could just have a sirloin that was going to cost me £9 a kilo, because I can put a big margin on that. Excuse me. But what I've also got to do is I've got to use all the minced product, and that's where the yield comes in. But when we work with the farmers closely and we get that consistency and that finishing of the animal, that's when we can utilise the whole product much easier as a butcher. Now the problem comes when we don't have that connectivity with our farmers, so we can't tell them what was good, what wasn't so good. We don't have that feedback. When we've got that feedback, when we say, Sam, that body of beef was brilliant, I've the same again. And then I'm looking at Sam to look after his farm and use his methods in the same way to deliver me the animal, the next animal that I'm going to do the same with. So we're massively reliant on what the farmers do.
Just touch on the size of beast that you really require.
Yeah, so obviously the trend was very much, again, talking about yield and businesses, the trend was very much, we have a bone structure, and on that bone structure we have muscle. The more muscle we put on that, the bone loss is going to be the same, but if there's more muscle, that means there's more profit for me. The issue with that is we tend to get more solid muscle. We don't get the right kind of marbling. We've got the wrong kind of breeds eating off on native pastures, and actually the end result, the finished eating quality isn't as good. Also, butchers have become a little bit softer than we used to be. We use a lot of what is called box beef. So majority of butchers in the UK now will just bring in a box of beef, like a box of steaks, and then they'll cut those steaks. They don't actually do the whole animal butchery. One of the problems there is we've forgotten how to carry things, and this is quite a weird thing to say, but we've forgotten how to carry carcasses. So when we're presented with a 350, 400 kilo carcass of a continental breed that we've then got to carry through our shops, we've got to get our apprentices to get that out, get it on the block. It's actually quite difficult. It's quite a hard thing to manipulate and use unless you're in a big production factory where you have the rails and it's all very much factory based. So for us, there's multiple reasons. If we went back to a native British breed, we're actually looking at a breed which is closer to the ground. So they're going to eat our pastures better. They're probably going to bring on that marbling and that cover better. It's going to be easier for us to actually butcher. And in terms of yield, when we've got an animal with a good finish and a good fat cover is very important. When we've got those yields coming in, actually we're still going to make good money. And unfortunately it does come back to money. Again, with that USP, it's the native British breeds which will make people look up and say, oh, that's a Hereford, that's a Sussex, whatever it may be. It gets people interested that we can track that breed back to the farmer, and then there's a reason that the farmers are breeding this way. And it is all translatable, and again, comes back to the end point. We're at the coal face with the customer, that person standing right in front of me. I've got to be able to deliver that information.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. So if I can introduce Kitty next.
So we are finishing everything on farm. We're spring and autumn calving because I want beef available all year round, because I'm selling it direct to customers in meat boxes that they subscribe to. So I need meat available every week of the year. We also have venison on farm, well, wild, and the lamb that goes into that as well. So this is where we're farming. It's on the River Wye, so I've got about 6 miles of riverbank. Yeah, plenty of pasture. They live out all year round, the sheep and the cattle. So we are bale grazing, using deferred grazing. This was a kale crop as well for a bit more protein. But because I do the whole process, I do rear the cattle, take it to the butchers, I choose how it's cut up, I deliver it to the customer, I get the feedback, good and bad. So I know cattle-wise, we're sending only 1 or 2 at a time. So I know exactly which animal it is that they're talking about when they say, that was really great, or, well, actually I don't get that much bad feedback, but that's tend to be from... So we bought in some really good cattle. The cattle that were already there, the farm's been organic for 20 years. It's been pasture-fed for over 10 years. So the animals are suited to that system, and they do really well. The carcasses are about between 300 and 310 kilos dead weight for the cattle, between 18 and 20 kilo dead weight for the lambs. They do really well on it. They are suited to that system. So, yeah, that definitely helps. I think I wouldn't be able to do it with blues or Simmentals on my farm. It just doesn't work. We've got some high ground, some pretty wet ground, a lot of ground that floods. I've got one very small shed, so if the weather is bad, they can't come in. I can fit about 3 cows in it out of 125. So this is our turnip and kale that we're grazing the fat lambs on to try and get them away before Christmas. I want lambs available all year round, so I don't want to get everything off the farm before Christmas, because I'm lambing in mid-March, so those lambs won't be available for Easter. So I've got hogget available at Easter time. I'd be stupid to sell all my lambs in market before Christmas when I know I can sell it at Easter. I just have to keep it a little bit longer. Yeah, these are the cattle, bale grazing. Moving towards mob grazing, we're just getting a bit more infrastructure. There's not a lot of fencing on the farm, so we're losing a lot of electric fencing to utilise the grazing we have got to make it last longer, either end of the season. We make all our forage on farm as well. it can be done, but you need the right animals and you need to farm them properly.
So, Kezzy, how often do you move the cattle?
In the winter, they're moved once, if not twice a day, depending on the weather. If it's really wet, they'll get moved twice a day. If it snows, we quite often move them twice a day. But they're always having fresh grass, fresh bales of hay, and sometimes forage crops, but not a lot of the time because our cattle get fat, even outside all year round, whether it's snowing. These are our ewe lambs, and they're lambs, so we lamb them down at a year old. 80% of them will have a lamb in that first year. Trying to keep the genetics. The sheep we're moving probably, this year, the first lambs were born outside in the snow. We have got 250 ewes. We used 4 round bales of hay this winter. That was it. The cattle are a lot more. They're 1 bale per 20 head. Again, we are rolling out the bales because we're in HLS. We can't use ring feeders, so we have to roll them out. That's a lot better. It avoids poaching. We don't get that much wastage. Anything that is left behind just adds to the organic matter in soil. So I'm not too worried about that. There's plenty of trees and hedges for them to graze on as well.
So do you find any of the cattle lose much condition over the winter, outwintering?
No, I have to be really wary of not putting too much weight on, especially for the spring calvers. Because it's amazing how much condition they keep. Yeah, even in the snow, the sheep would rather eat the grass than the hay I was putting out. I think I sent you too many videos.
Great selection. Okay, so we'll move on to Angus, please.
I think I'll try and give you a bit of context as to how we ended up where we are now on a forage-based system with the type of stocks that we have. We've got to go back to sort of late 90s, early 2000s. The driver in the change was cost of production. At that time, we were in pretty tough times with having just recently purchased a farm, not great mortgage, lots of things had happened in ag, BSc, foot and mouth was happening at the same time. So, we had to have some pretty radical changes. Forage-based systems interested, both my brother and I, would already close the sheep flock down and started to take control of our genetics in that side of things. As far as the cattle goes, back then we were breeding a lot of continental cattle, heavily muscled animals, breeding them for the shoring, and been quite successful in that area, but success doesn't necessarily translate into the balance sheet. So although it looked quite good, we were hemorrhaging money out of the suckler herd at the time. We were involved in a benchmarking group, and there was 15 pretty good suckler farmers all put their figures together in 2004 to see whether we could nail as to what was happening within the suckler herd. And when we sat down with our figures and looked at them, the average in that group was losing £400 a cow. So it just showed us what the subsidy system was allowing us to do with suckler cows, and that was pretty much keep them as a hobby. So at that point, we couldn't afford to be doing that. Our situation wouldn't allow us to carry on like that, so we had to change. Along with the disease outbreak of Campylobacter in the cows, we weren't closed. We were buying in heifers with calves at foot. So we scanned in 2003, or 2004, and had 25% geld. So at that point decided to close the suckler herd down as well. So we went down the Aberdeen Angus route and looked at the natives so we could utilise more forage. So that was the catalyst for change. After that, it was just a matter of learning about how we were going to do it. And there was a lot of trial and error, a lot of error on the way. So that leads us to where we are now, with a spring calving herd of about 240 Angus and Hereford cows. Start calving on the 1st of April, and have it all done. Try and have it all done in 8 weeks. All the cows are outwintered on either bale grazing or deferred grazing. As you can see now, we've got the R1 heifers on strip grazing grass, so they are on deferred grass and baled silage, bale grazing. The steers go inside for a couple of months onto silage. So they're the only cattle which are housed for a small period of time. The heifers, as you see in the picture here, they will have access to silage as well as the grass. So, as far as the genetics go, both with the sheep and the cattle, we were very focused on having maternal genetics. We'll calve outside and we'll lamb outside, so the maternal genetics trumped everything else as far as we were concerned on that one. If we didn't have live lambs or live calves, then the rest of it was really pretty pointless. So luckily, as far as some of the maternal genetics go and grass finishing, the two match together quite nicely. We're looking for positive fats on both sides. We're needing our cows to carry condition into the winter, but we're also needing, them to live off a forage-based diet and finish easy. So it was starting to try and finish cattle off a forage-based system. I think the genetics are really important. We have to have things which just don't keep growing forever. So we have a moderate-sized cow. With a moderate-sized cow, which suits our maternal genetics and suits the finishing side of things as far as that goes. Easy fleshed. So what we'll do with the steers is give them a pretty tough winter. We'll only grow at 0.3, 0.4 of a kilogram after weaning, but the key to it for us is to get them out onto rotation as soon as possible and keep the winter as short as we possibly can, so that we can get back up to a kilo plus a day of growth after that. And then the aim will be to finish as many as we possibly can at 18 to 20 months of forage that autumn. As far as that goes, we're targeting a 300 kilogram carcass, fat class 4. I think we could probably get them heavier. We're just still probably a bit tough on them. Winter, haven't got the winter cracked as yet. I think unlike the rest of the panel, we are the only ones, we're the only ones here who don't direct sell. Everything goes into the trade as far as like organically to cattle go to Duffcote Park, and most of our lambs go to Randall Parker and such like. They are the sheep are part of the Ram Compare project. So as far as it goes, days to slaughter is quite an important thing for us. With the lambs, the terminal sire lambs, we'll be looking to grow them on the clover lays at 400 grams a day if possible, and start killing at 80 days and have as many away as possible pre-weaning. With the terminal lambs, we'll look to target about 75 to 80% of lambs slaughtered off mum, which equates to about a quarter of the flock. The rest of the flock is bred for replacements or sale as breeding sheep. They're all signet recorded. So obviously they are slower, and we need all the females are retained in that side of things. So yeah, for us, it's quite key to keep good stuff in front of the lambs. We're lucky we have a good relationship with some organic arable farmers in the Berkshire area who grow a lot of clover lays, and that's where the sheep tend to go. The cattle stay at Thistleyhalf on rotations. Like I say, looking to finish reasonably fast. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can I just, what sort of rotational period are you operating?
So as far as the finishing cattle are going, we would look, it depends on where they are on the farm, because we're not very ring fenced in it, but probably 3-day shifts if we can possibly do it. I think it's important not to make them, where we have went wrong in the past is used them as a bit of a leader follower for the sheep. So yeah, making them eat too much. We've got to be happy to leave a reasonable amount of residual if we are trying to fatten cattle on grass. You can always clean it up with something else. So yeah, ideally I'd probably shift them more than that, but it's just practicality sometimes with it not being ring fenced. We have quite a bit of tarmac to cover to get the things. So yeah, and cows at the minute, cows are in mobs. The biggest mobs of 100, and they're on daily moves.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, over to Denise.
Great, thanks very much, Nigel. So, given that financial resilience is the main driver for all of us on our farms, my husband and I, we were new entrant smallholders on 20 acres in our early 30s, and what really drove us then was being independent of a marketplace that we saw was suppressing innovation in our sort of farming neighbours. So in terms of financial resilience, we always felt that we needed a downstream outlet for our meat on our farm. So actually selling direct was a very important driver from us from the word go, and that has had a direct impact on the way we farm now. But in addition to that sort of pragmatic aspiration, a very important aspiration for me anyway, because my background is as an ecologist, is biodiversity. And it wasn't that long into our farming career that we soon realized that actually you can't have one without the other. You know, if you really want to work with financial resilience, you have to look at biodiversity. You have to consider the welfare of your animals. You know, well-kept, well-looked after, happy animals, the vet and med is less than intensively farmed animals. I mean, you'll all know this. So, having built the butchery in 2008, and then in a very naive fashion, also working with our customers, we soon realized the value of eating quality. So eating quality became a very important driver of what we did. And then learning about aging and managing meat in a butchery context, as well as in the farm context. So having been mixed farm, and in the last sort of 20 years building the habitat infrastructure on our farm, so we've actually got a more welfare-friendly farm in terms of hedgerows and trees and woodlands for the rest. We realised the importance of biodiversity value to eating quality. What we have now is all beef, and where we've got to now, we've been practicing really rigorously in the last 3 years sort of pasture for life, light rotational mob grazing, which actually was disturbed, affected by Storm Arwen, because the storm felled a lot of trees, which felled a lot of fences, so we actually weren't able to outdoor carve as early as we had wanted to. But what we're finding now is that no inputs, no agrochemical inputs whatsoever. We're bringing in our 2021 calving started coming in September of 2022. We were bringing in, within that time period, dead weight of 240, 250 kilos, and now we're bringing in, from the same calving period, dead weight of over 300 kilos. So what I did, I don't know if you can see this, you probably can't, but anyway, you'll all be familiar with the Europe system. So what I decided to do is just plot on this colourful graph, and I don't usually see the green. The green is what, Simon, is acceptable to the British public. Yes, oh, thanks, Angus. But effectively, since January, all of our animals have come in as 3-4L or U4L. So not all of them, but most of them, the vast majority, over 50%. And so, we're not a highly productive farm, but what it does demonstrate is that all grass, no agrochemical input, no grain, we are achieving low input, low impact, sufficient output. So get away from high output. We've got sufficient for our needs and for our customers' needs. And also what we've had done is we've been part of a Newcastle University research looking at the nutrient density of meat coming off different grazing systems. So they looked at cattle coming from supermarkets, all grain, grain and grass, all grass, conservation grassland. And absolutely unequivocal results of the high nutrient density, omega-3, for beef that are grass only, and particularly nutrient-rich grass. So we are getting, triple wins. I know we're getting better biodiversity, we're getting better soils. We've realised, and this came as a very exciting surprise to us, the impact of our rotational method, which my son Angus has really been driving, in terms of rest and grazing rhythm in our grassland. So broadly speaking, during the summertime, we've split our fields up into 10-acre paddocks, 3 days on, 30 days off, approximately 30 cows and a bull in a group. At the moment, because it's so dry, we're just doing 1 day grazing and then a shorter period, probably about 3 weeks rest. And the root biomass stimulation from that system is phenomenal. The regrowth of grass after grazing is phenomenal, and I can see the benefits of biodiversity. And also the other thing that, when we're checking our stock, you can see the indicators of satisfaction and well-being in our cattle. They're satiated, they're ruminating, they know when they want to move. So there's a really good rhythm with our cattle in the way that we graze. So what we've also focused on is breeding, looking at both the bull and the cow genetics, specifically, but in priority, in relation to rumen size. So great big roomy rumens that can really ferment the grass and convert grass to fat. So that's what we've been moving to. Stocky Aberdeen Angus, big rumens, lots of capacity to convert grass. And also our grazing system. So we're exploring the best kind of rotation, but also looking at species mixes for our grasses. Anything else?
Lovely, thanks very much, Denise. We're a little bit ahead of time, but I'm hoping you will all have lots of questions for us. So would anyone like to ask the panel some questions? This man here, the microphone is on its way.
Hi, Gillen Doby. We're sheep farmers in the Borders. 3,000 acres, 1,500. 3,000 sheep, 1,500 acres. I'd like to understand from the panel. We're putting 500 lambs on a lorry, on lorries, every other week in the summer. Is there a pull through for that kind of that quantity of meat? If we were to adopt some of the things that you're doing, which are fantastic, we're selling. We've got to get those lambs away. Can you access that premium to, for example, to butchers like yourself, if you're producing that many and you're trying to get those lambs away? Because we're struggling to move away from selling our lamb to the conventional slaughterhouse and the conventional supply route, which goes into supermarkets, where some of the things that perhaps we want to do aren't valued in the price that we then receive for the product that we get.
Are you looking at your costs? Are you looking at your costs?
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to do is reduce the amount of feed. We don't plough. We're trying to stop using fertilizer. Well, we have stopped because we just simply can't afford it anymore. But one of the things we're trying to balance is, well, should we just have less stock and then produce less, but then how do we continue to employ the staff that we use to manage our animals? So what I'm trying to get is, what I want to do on our farm is produce a lot of lambs, as many as we can, but also be able to access that premium that perhaps you can get on a smaller scale. And I haven't quite bridged that gap, because certainly when we spec to our slaughterhouse at the Highland Show last week, they gave us 2 penny extra on the pound, and that wasn't enough to do what we want to do.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it is a journey. So there is no quick switch. There is a premium, particularly in the smaller butcheries, which we're seeing. But because it is a journey, we're also seeing a lot of bigger interest. So we tend to be the, excuse me, we tend to be that initial point where we're not it's going to sound stupid, but we start a trend or there's a craze or this thing comes through at the smaller level and it will get bigger. And we're already on that journey, so we're already seeing plenty of demand in our shops, and then we'll get that starting to be mimicked throughout the whole sector. So I completely get what you're saying. It is a journey. I also get the point about cost, because there's lots of ways you can look at it. But there are also lots of people who are looking for this product, and it's just finding that right supply chain, and that's where Pasture for Life will be able to help. Get in touch. You don't have to become fully accredited straight away. You can become a member and just use the information board to help you on the journey, and then there may well become a point on your journey where you switch to accredited, and then you can get that extra price point as well. Don't know if that helps. Hope it does.
Angus, do you want to just pick up on?
Yeah, I would say that, when you're finishing your lambs, which is prime, like finishing time, the volume of stock, volume of lambs in the marketplace, I certainly think remarkable that we'll get them shifted all at that time anyway, the amount of wagon loads going into these abattoirs. So that's probably one of the things you're going to have to accept, that you're wanting your lambs away soon. You're not wanting to carry them into the autumn or into winter. Lamb isn't cheap. So when we're saying about a premium on it, if your costs of production are right and you're getting your lambs away as fast as that, there's going to be a limit on how much we can actually start and ask for lamb before people actually stop buying. I would think, Simon would be the first to say that it's really hard for some of these guys to make on lamb when they've got them. So we've got to be realistic in what we actually want for lamb. And I think because you're doing a good job and getting as many away as you are, as soon as you are, that you might just have to be happy with that. If I'm going to be brutally honest with you, if you're keeping lambs through into the winter and into the next spring, then you are going to need more money for them. But because you're getting them away, you're freeing your farm of the parasite burden of them, you're freeing up the rest of your farm for your ewe flock. I think you've got to take that as your pluses, rather as just looking for a premium on your lamb.
If I can just add, 2 days a week I do spend trying to work for Pasture for Life on the supply chain. Just to pick up on what Simon said, it is a journey, but the speed of this journey seems to be picking up at the moment. There's an awful lot more public awareness, and particularly restaurant awareness of our produce. So I think for you, look at adopting the system. The market will come. Build it, they will come. Any more questions?
How did you find the market to start selling direct? Because I've tried and it hasn't happened, but I really would like to sell my meat locally. We're in quite a poor area and it's not really appreciated, the system that I've implemented, and they just want cheap meat where I live, but obviously I can't sell it for as cheap as they want it. So how did you guys start doing that? Because it's quite scary to kind of, make the first step if they're not going to buy it.
Denise?
Well, I suppose we started with farmers markets in 2000, and they were very reluctant markets to sell at. I suppose if you were to start now in your circumstances, I can understand the difficulty of that. But if you want to sell locally, you probably do have to meet your customer halfway in terms of price, and definitely do tastings. See if you can do tastings at small outlets in your area, and just have cooked tastings and samples, and just generate an income, an interest like that. And that's probably the way to do it. But also in terms of the income groups that now buy from us, whereas initially when we started, it was very much the blue-collar academic professional in Edinburgh, now it's right across the board. There really is no distinction between, from what we can see in our customers in terms of income, as to what's driving them to buy. So we have single mums with, kids in prams buying perhaps only from us once a month, and because they can afford that, because they actually want meat with provenance and meat that isn't affecting biodiversity or welfare. So if you're doing that, then definitely do tasters.
Just to jump in on that, it's taken us sort of 5 years to develop a very small local, well, not too local market. It's tough. It's tough to get going. Use social media as much as you can, and yeah, like I say, over that period of time, there's a few times where I wanted to stop doing it because it's such stress. But we've now found a place where we can almost predict what we're going to sell every week, which is a nice place to be in. And to echo what Denise said, your customers are going to be a really diverse range, from people that are in pretty big houses to the guys that work at Gatwick and on the baggage handling. That's the diversity that we're seeing. Will Harris says some really good thing about direct selling, and that is that you're not going to sell to your friends, you're not going to sell to your neighbours, but you're going to find the right type of customer that's going to want your produce. So stick with it. Anyone else?
I'm back. I am back. Cool. I just want to say, from a butcher's perspective, if you're having your meat cut by a butcher or in the slaughterhouse, whatever it is, speak to them about what they can do for you in terms of Dr. John Medley. He's always quoting to be elite but not elitist. So just because your product is more valuable doesn't mean you have to exclude a customer base. So there are things you can do. There's value-added products. So sausages, biltong, charcuterie, they're longer processes, but actually there's more margin in them, and they can sell at a cheaper price point. And there's clever things you can do with mince, stewing. You can do little cooking guides for people where they're not having to come and buy fillet steak, sirloin steak. You could perhaps take those cuts and sell them to a local restaurant and just give them the prime, but then offer value to people elsewhere. And again, I feel like I'm trying to sell Pasture for Life here, but you can become a member, and there's some really good case studies of what other people are already doing. So they'll share their journeys, they'll tell you how they started, the little tips and tricks that they're already using. So it's a really good network to get answers for things like that.
Yeah, so we've actually only been going for 18 months. We've actually got a market garden on farm as well, and someone growing organic flowers. So we work under the same business name, selling all of those together, using the same delivery van. We actually only sell locally, only within 15 miles of the farm, because I really want to sell local food to local people. I want that to be a core of the business, to people to know where their food comes from. I don't want to sell it to London. I could get a better price, but I want to sell it to local people who really care about where their food comes from, so they want it to be local. Try and get people on farm if you can. Social media is that kind of interim step of most people have got Facebook. It's free to use Facebook. Find your local groups, share it on there, and try and connect people with the animals and the farming and that side of it, rather than just the meat, because they see the meat in the supermarket. They need to know why yours is different and see the whole side of it. And yeah, if you can show people how you're farming and get them hooked that way, it's that's the way we do it.
Thanks, Kitty. Do we have any more questions?
Some nice pictures of nice green grass being grazed. How are you all doing, likes of last summer and this summer? Are you growing crops that you can still finish animals on in drought conditions?
Last year I've had about 120 head of cattle and probably 500 sheep in that drought. I used 4 bales of hay. I could have done without it. I had one that I had to go and pick up with the tractor because they just didn't eat it. We are understocked because we're still building numbers up, but regular moving, resilient grass, leave that grass longer, put the topper away, don't use it. And yeah, we didn't actually really have to use that hay, and we were fine. and yeah, still carried on finishing animals.
Yeah, that was our experience too. So all of that. And actually last summer I probed a neighbour's oilseed rape stubble at 31 degrees. And I then went to deferred grass with us, and it was 21 degrees. So you've got that immediate difference that's actually maintaining moisture. But certainly I completely concur with what Kitty's saying.
With us, I think clover is our saviour in situations like that. Quite a lot of red clover growing on the farm, so it keeps the lambs moving on. Again, just clear the farm, have trading stock is another thing, you know, like if you don't need them on your place, then get rid. Someone else will want them. If you're going to start an impact on your winter forage supplies and it's going to affect how you're going to winter cattle or winter sheep, then I'm a great believer in just clearing the decks with what you can, just making room, because you need to keep your breeding stock right. So, yeah, if you're running short, just look what's saleable, would what I would say, yeah.
Gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Jim Beery, an upland farmer from Cumbria. I know Angus reasonably well. One of the biggest challenges I've had from transitioning from a more traditional system to grass-fed is the marbling in the beef. You know, dealing with quite a lot of chefs, they're used to a certain product. It's quite hard to achieve that on a grass-based system. I'm just wondering if any of you guys have got any advice or experience regarding that.
I'm going to ask for Simon's
Yeah,
Simon's
I'll go.
response to this.
So I completely hear what you're saying. So it is when you get into the chef world or even our customer world, it's the be-all and end-all. It's the showpiece. When we cut that rib and you want to see that marbling, that's what's going to get the best premium. So if we don't have that good marbling, then I have to say we are on the farmer saying, why has this happened? In the early days where I've used farms that are transitioning, and again, still on that journey, we have had to have that conversation, give that feedback. But actually, again, I used Sam as an example, sat there, amazing pastures, and I'm not entirely sure of what you're doing, Sam, but they eat so well when they finish that the marbling's there. Again, I would suggest that they need that good pasture their whole life, because marbling doesn't happen in an instant. You want those flecks all the way through. Lightning bolts are the big finish in the marbling, which is okay because you still get the moisture in the meat, you still see the marbling, but actually that flecking is far better. And I think, unfortunately, that's not my department, but we can give that feedback. But yes, I completely hear what you're saying. It's the finishing that really does count for us, and that fat cover.
So can you just get that across again, Simon? It's what you see in the meat, I'm right, on something that's 100% pasture finished and slowly finished, you're seeing these little starlets of fat, whereas if you then intensively feed with...
So generally when you get a heavily grain-fed finished animal, you get like a lightning bolt of marbling that will go through the meat, a real thick stem coming up where the fat's been introduced in one hit. But what you really want, and this is if a chef's really getting detailed about it, is the tiny flecks, the little stripes that completely marble it. This is a real Instagram thing. But when you turn up the saturation on a photo on Instagram, it highlights the marbling. So don't be fooled by any of my photos. But what it does is it highlights all those flecks. So it's a nice way to tell. But you'll see it. It takes the real red shine off a piece of meat. So when we cut it, when those flecks are in it, it immediately dulls the colour. And often it's that slightly duller colour that we're looking for. But they're very visual. And that's a key bit of feedback that we can give and have that conversation.
Again, also I'd say we've done some tastings recently with some pretty high-profile chefs, and they're actually recognising how different the produce tastes. So stick with it, communicate with them, get them to do more tastings.
Just on that note as well, there is a pasture-fed animal does tend to be more active. That means there is actually more collagen in the meat, and a good way to speak to a chef is to explain that. So more collagen means more bite, but actually when that collagen is hydrolysized, that's what gives that mouth feel, that coating, that real sort of liquid that sticks in the mouth. So it's just another selling tactic, but it is very true. There is more about this meat, nutritionally and taste profile.
And actually, we've had some quite interesting feedback from chefs who've used our meat, that if they use our beef bones for stock, they get a really good quality jus, whereas if they use beef bones from grain-based, it's actually very, very different. So there's something in the bone and in the marrow that gives us very good, consistent, firm stock.
I completely agree. So we make stocks, and that is exactly the case. You get the proper jelly wobble, and it's much easier to get with a pasture-fed animal. And again, we don't just use the bones; we use the connective tissue, so like the gristle. Again, that's very heavily collagen-based, and when we put those in with the bones, the stock it creates is fantastic. And again, it's another selling point, and also nutritionally, it's a fact. There is more nutrition in this beef than there is in the standard beef.
Anyone else to ask us some questions? This gentleman down here.
Hi, we farm in the Worcestershire-Warwickshire border. Just quite interested, you guys, you're rearing all your cows outside or in the winter time.
Just hold your mic up to your lip. That's it.
How does your ground fare up to the cattle in the winter months? Because half our land is owned and half it's tenanted. I think if our tenants saw us cows out in the winter time, they'd hit the roof. Just want your opinion on it and any methods of keeping it right, really. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it if it was making a mess and wrecking your grassland. What's your grassland like in the spring after it?
Kitty?
Yeah, it doesn't work on every land. Sometimes you just have to admit it doesn't work on your land. But we won't outwinter on the same field 2 years in a row. We are moving them every day. We don't use ring feeders, so you don't get that poaching. We roll the bales out completely, so it spreads the cattle around. Back fencing to avoid poaching. Sometimes you do get poaching. It's just you get an absolute pour down, or you'll get a lot of snow and then it will melt and it's wet. But then keep them off that ground as soon as you can. Take them off it. But because we're using deferred grazing as well, the grass that is there is a lot longer, a bit stemmier, which is holding the ground together as well as the small stuff. So they're not on very short new seeds. It seems to be working for us. We've got smaller cattle, New Zealand genetic Hereford, so they are shorter, they're lighter, they're a bit stockier, and I would never outwinter on the river meadows. So pick your field, definitely.
Angus?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what Kitty said there. I think it's not for everybody, and I would definitely say go into it with the plan B at the start. But also what Kitty says, grass covers is quite important. You know, I think you've got to be starting to think about it now or before now if you're going to be out wintering. We do a lot of deferred grazing, but we're on quite a lot of rough ground on our place, which we will not graze from August time. It's stuff that you can't put tractors on, so we'll strip graze that stuff. But again, plenty cover, plenty armour on the soil with the grass covers that you're leaving behind. We also bale graze, again, no ring feeders. I think there's some plenty horror stories about outwintering, and we don't need to add to them by just going blanket that everybody can outwinter, because that's not the case. Some farms just aren't suitable. But I do think most farms will have a place where you could have a go. I think there will be a field or a place on some farm where you can have a go. We done it for the first time in 2007 with cows. I had an idea to set aside a 50-acre field with deferred grass for cows, and put them on in November, and after 2 weeks I had to bring them off. It was just a disaster. It took us 10 years to pluck up the courage to do it again because it was the wrong field choice. What it did allow us to do was we then sort of learned how to defer grass for sheep, and we used it for sheep, so set up an all grass wintering system for the sheep then. But like I say, it took us a long time to be brave enough to go back to it. But now we're in a situation where pretty much all the cattle are wintered. But there are some places on the farm where you just wouldn't go.
Thank you. Anyone else? This lady here.
Just come.
Julia Horner from the middle of the Yorkshire Dales on limestone. We've got Aberdeen Angus, Delbred sheep. I'm very interested in the research. Did you say it was Newcastle University that had done research showing that grass-fed and finished meat contains micronutrients? These are the things that we have to let the populace know about, the quality and the difference of the kind of meat that we can produce as opposed to what is termed red meat, all the conservation background and food value that it has throughout the integrity of the food. Public have got to know about these things. It's a matter of how we do it.
Yeah,
Thank
we get a lot of customers saying your beef is really beefy.
Yeah.
It's a really strong flavour. It's not like normal beef.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, because it's not normal beef. It's
Yeah.
not like the supermarket beef you're used to. But it's actually a really useful marketing tool for people who are wanting to reduce their meat intakes.
Yeah.
And because our beef is more expensive, we say, yeah, you don't need it to use as much because that flavour is there and the nutrients are there. You can use less, so you reduce your intake. You're not buying as much. You reduce the wastage as well, but the flavour is still there and the nutrients are still there.
And it's more satisfying.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, just quickly on that, one of the things that we do get confused about is that meat is actually incredibly nutrient dense, no matter where it comes from. But what we can now do is we can categorically say that pasture raised is even better. But where we've demonised meat for so long, meat isn't actually seen as what it should be. So we should be able to separate ourselves and say, actually, this is a good cause that we can scream about. Because usually, as a butcher, we've had the rough end of the stick for a very long time in just bad media. But you're absolutely right that this kind of good media, this good message should be put through to the public. It's just, can we all get together and deliver that message?
Thank you. Any last questions? Yes, please. Lady over there.
Going back to the difference between like conventional farming and making a premium product, do you think like the Europe system plays a part in how farmers are rewarded, so they're less driven to make a premium product and like do it conventionally in sheds? Do you think that needs to be addressed or updated, or what are your opinions on that?
Denise?
Well, obviously we're sourcing direct from our fields into the butcheries, so we don't actually use it. So I just used it for the benefit of this talk to demonstrate where our cattle were falling. But obviously, if you are, I understand AHDB are actually going to discontinue using the Europe thing. So is that what's directing your question? Do we need something? Well, perhaps you can respond to that.
Yeah,
Simon.
I think that the real key part of it is it gives us a guide. So there is a sort of an ideal point on the system, and that is where the majority of the public want to buy their meat. So that is a guide for farmers to hit that finishing point, and that's really what it's about. It's a guide. Again, we don't always have beef graded that comes through. We do it by eye, but for the mass population, you do need a stick with which to measure most things. So really, it's there so that we get a good shape, a little bit of fat cover. Marbling doesn't really come into it but because of the fact it will generally come across anyway. I think, again, it's more about relationships. It's more about the rest of the story that will go with it, but we do kind of still need a measuring method. Otherwise, you'll just get all sorts of different gradings coming in the same, and that wouldn't work for a mass market.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've kind of come to the end of our time, so thank very much to our panel. Hope you've enjoyed it, and if anyone would like to continue any of these conversations, please come over to the Pasture for Life tent and join the community. Thank you very much.